Hello and welcome to the Collapse Experiment. If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe. When atheism became a religion. Sounds kind of counterproductive, right? So a little background on me. I was raised Catholic, although people tend to have different definitions of what exactly that means. My mom and I sometimes were like the Christmas Catholics and the Easter Catholics, which means, well, if it's an important day, we'll actually go into a church. Not exactly keeping up with Catholic doctrine, right? Also went to Catholic schools from kindergarten all the way to high school. And the thing with me, and why I'm no longer part of that religion, is the more I learned, the less it made any sense. And for some reason, I wanted to have something to believe in. But I knew by the time I was done with high school, that was not it for me. And of course, any good Catholic would say, well, it's not about what you agree with, it's whether or not it's the right religion. There's an awful lot of religions out there to have only just one right one. So that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me either. So after high school, I kind of dipped out of the whole religion thing for a bit. A couple years later, got married. Was married in a Methodist church and didn't really have any idea as to what Methodist or Baptist or Lutherans or evangelicals or Seventh-day Adventist. I didn't know what any of that stuff meant. All I was told growing up was those are the wrong ones. So I start going with my wife to this Methodist church, and it really wasn't all that different from the Catholics. So we were going there for a bit. Some things happened. I think the hierarchy of the actual church started to fall apart at one point. And I got to the point where I was just kind of like, I think I'm just done with this whole Western religion thing. Like, let's see what's elsewhere. So for a while, I started reading about Buddhism. Brad Warner has some really good books on Zen Buddhism. Started getting into meditation quite a bit. And a lot of that also had to do with my background in martial arts. Never got interested in Islam. That never appealed to me. That was just more of like, they have their thing over there, and they can keep that over there, was my mentality. The history of that religion just told me, I might learn about it. There's no way in hell I would ever practice that shit. So then I was a Buddhist for a while. Finally took a comparative religion class in college. And just from taking that comparative religion class, I was like, that combined with all the other reading I had done and all these other religions throughout those years in my 20s, I was like, there's some truth in all of it, but it's all bullshit. That was where my conclusions had come to. Even the Buddhist temples I had been going to, where I'd go for like meditation and classes and stuff, it was like constantly begging for money. Like money was like a huge factor with all of these religions. And I remember at one point somebody saying that, if God really wanted to support these things, wouldn't God do it itself, himself, herself, whatever you want to refer to God as? So that never really connected with me. This whole idea of like, we have to get money from our followers in order to keep this going because it won't survive on its own. So then I started looking at atheism, which, from my initial understanding, was you don't believe there's a God. Even Buddhists don't really refer to or think of there being a God, right? They look at the now, they look at the present, they may look at the universe as a whole, and if they do talk about God, it's that everything combined together is part of like the God particle. So I start looking into this. I start listening to atheist podcasts. I start uh, looking at the books by the Four Horsemen, if you're familiar with those guys, like Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens. I really liked Christopher Hitchens. And of course, he's the one that is no longer with us. But Christopher Hitchens had some brilliant writer, had some really fascinating, intelligent things to say. Richard Dawkins kind of lost it. He kind of lost it. Sam Harris, holy shit, did he completely fucking lose it. Sam Harris, the guy who would talk slowly and be able to convince you of a great many things because of his higher intelligence and the way that he looks like Ben Stiller but has a higher IQ. No, it's these guys have completely fallen to the wayside. And what really did it in for me with the whole atheist movement was when I was listening to this podcast for like a year or two. And it wasn't just this podcast. It was across the whole community, if you will, where you couldn't just be an atheist. No. If you wanted to be a good atheist, well, you have to be a good feminist. And if you want to be a good atheist, and the list grew and grew, and you had to involve all these other things, and to the point where all of a sudden it's wokeism, and you have to be all encompassing, but then they had zero tolerance. That was the kicker, right? If you didn't fall in line with something that they were just now initially adding to the curriculum of being a good atheist, then you're pretty much shunned. So I saw this happening, and I was like, I don't understand what any of this, like, what does this have to do with just not believing that there's a higher being? Like, why is all this other shit being included? Why is Satanism being included in atheism? Why are like third generation feminist ideas being included in atheism? Why is wokeism being included in atheism? Like, I'm sure if that podcast was still around during 2020, which I think it stopped in like 2019, but if it was still around in 2020, oh, they would have been all over the whole George Floyd thing, right? They would have been pro BLM. They would have been pro trans. They would have been just everything. They would have gotten their hands in everything, to the point where, just like wokeism, unless you believe everything checked down the list, well, we're not going to accept you. I'm sorry, but I don't remember there being like a club member card that you're given when you become an atheist. I don't remember there being like a monthly membership fee. I didn't know you had to go to school for this. Like, it's just the idea of, hey, I don't believe in this thing. But no, they turned it into a religion. And I think this is why you don't hear about it anymore. Overall, not just the Four Horsemen, but even the guys below them, they all ended up screwing up drastically in their own way, right? They couldn't just stick to the theme of what this movement was supposed to be. I'm not going to call it a religion. I'm going to call it what it was. It was basically a movement of saying, like, we're sick and tired of being ruled by religion. For example, why can't you go out Sunday morning, buy a beer, especially if you work third shift on a Saturday night? It's the end of your day, right? But no, there's for some reason a religious-based law, when we're not supposed to have religious-based laws in this country, that prevents you from having a beer after a hard day of work on a Sunday morning. I don't understand it. Why somebody who doesn't believe in said religion has to be upheld to that standard? I don't remember living under Sharia law, okay? But that is where we're at. It's stuff like that that makes things frustrating for people who it doesn't pertain to, right? I don't think that one person's religion should dictate over how another person should live. And most religions, except for those weird ones in Africa where they're cannibalistic, they really, well, and another one that I've already mentioned that I'm probably going to get death threats for, but they really don't impede on anybody else unless there's some insecure members. And I've come across those quite a bit. I've got members of my own family where it's like, I casually like to enjoy smoking a pipe, and I used to enjoy having a glass of wine. And that pretty much got me shunned out of their house. I mean, I was never invited back. That was something that had come up during the conversation, and I could instantly see the judgment, the physical, like, oh my God, he's in our house. We're going to have a, yeah. The most insecure members of our society are the ones that do this to other people who it should not pertain to. And unfortunately, that is the world that we live in. Where am I at now? Well, obviously, if the atheist movement, if this is the road that this is the road that they decided to go down, right? Let's be clear on this. Nobody stopped these people. Me, I tried saying something at one point in time. There was one episode of the podcast which I used to listen to live. I would comment. And there's one episode where the girls on the podcast were talking about guys refusing to support their kids. And at the same time, I was like, okay, all these other times they're talking about being really independent women. We don't need men. But then they're bitching about not getting child support and like not having support for the kids, right? So there's kind of this back and forth. And at one point I commented in the chat about how maybe if they stopped having sex with douchebags, this wouldn't be a problem. That should have been the end of it. But no, the host got really pissed off and said, are you trying to say that women can't have sex with who they want? With whoever they want? And I said, no. There's consequences for all actions. And if you're going to make poor choices on who you allow in your body, you're going to have poor consequences later. Oh, well, that's just... And there was this big, long back and forth. One of the other co-hosts agreed with me. But then the rest of the group, because they were women and they're all in these shitty situations with these shitty guys that they decided to sleep with, not taking into consideration of like, well, he's hot. I'd let him in me. Is this somebody who would pay child support? Is this somebody who's going to spend the rest of his life with you if you end up pregnant? Is this somebody who's going to run off and start another family somewhere else? And so basically, I was told if I didn't have strong feminist ideas, I was a bad atheist and I shouldn't be listening to their podcast anymore. So that was the start of the downfall right there for me. Was me, a person who regularly listened to the podcast, and two, was trying to give some actual like good advice, but no, they were really pushing the whole like you should be able to make bad choices and have no repercussions for it. They pushed that a lot. And I don't know where they came up with this stupid idea from, but for some reason there was no consequences for women, and I'm sure a lot of it had to do with like the host, who was also married with kids, was sleeping with one of the co-hosts, who wasn't his wife. And then they're having these other, oh man, what was his name? There was a doctor. He wrote a couple of books. One, I think, was called the God Virus. But this guy was really pushing like polyamory and not getting married. And he would basically have these parties at his house that divulged into like orgies. And he admitted this on the show. And his whole idea was like, we need to go back to like the caveman days where, you know, women would have sex with random dudes and, you know, the whole tribe would raise the kid. And it's like, they had tribes back then. We don't have tribes now. And the only reason that all the dudes in the tribe would help raise that kid is because the dudes are like, it could be mine. It's not like they had DNA tests back then. So where am I at today? Well, I wouldn't say I'm an atheist. Because I'm sorry, but when your religion is consistently being promoted by a long series of assholes, which is what I've come across when it comes to even the atheist movement. They're just assholes. Sam Harris, total asshole. Like, doesn't make any fucking sense with anything that he says anymore these days. Richard Dawkins might be an idiot, but at least he'll admit when he's wrong. I give him credit for that. Plus, he's getting old, and I think he's starting to realize that a lot of the stuff that he said before was probably just feeble-minded and not completely thought through. Christopher Hitchens, I still read his books from time to time. Brilliant man. Honestly, I don't remember who the fourth one is. But yeah, you know, it could have been something, but then it had to be taken over by a series of demented idiots and retards to have it completely squandered and ruined for the rest of us. Like, why did you have to involve the Satanists? Why did you have to get involved with the feminists? Why? Why at all? I'm sure he got involved with BLM. And it's like, just because you're getting some limelight, again, not thinking ahead, not thinking the long haul. It's what kind of momentum can we get now to keep this going, as opposed to, if we just stick with our ideas, people might actually be attracted to this. I know. Where am I at today? Religion is a hobby for people who actually have spare times on their hands and nothing to really seriously worry about. Do these people have bills? Are they working towards anything? Do they have goals in life? I understand the whole like going to church on Sunday thing, and a lot of that is just as it was put to me in high school. It's man, what do they call that? My brain is still not working as of yet from being sick. A lot of it is business connections. A lot of that Sunday stuff. Oh, Bob's got a roofing business. So and so's got an auto garage. Hey, we'll fix your roof if you can fix our car. Sometimes it goes deeper than that. But a lot of the whole Sunday thing is just business. It's not religion. Atheism tried to become a business. Life is too short in order to waste it on other people's imaginary delusions of grandeur. That includes atheism.